recording. So we dedicate this presentation to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Join me in this prayer, Mangalacharan prayer. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Translation: I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, who has opened my eyes, which were blinded by the darkness of ignorance, with the torchlight of knowledge. Join me also for the Pranam Mantra of Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vignavinasha Narasimha Iti Namine Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayatim girim yat kripa tamaham vande Sri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanyam Ishwaram Tatsat. So can we all say these two mantras together? So the first is the Panchata Mantra, and then we will say the Hare Krishna mantra 3 times for the pleasure of Sri Sri Nitai Sundar Gaura Hari and Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is our Utsava deities, Sri Sri Radha Gokulananda, and this is one of the swing festivals. We put them on a swing. So here we have decorated the swing like a flower. So this is a pranam mantra for Krishna. So we usually when we take the darshan of Krishna, we mention this prayer. We utter this prayer. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. So before we begin Bhagavad Gita, let us chant this mantra, invocation mantra for Bhagavad Gita 3 times. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And before we continue with the chapter for today, we do a bit of recap of chapter 11, which we covered yesterday. So the title yesterday was, if you remember, the universal form or the Vishwarupa. So these were some of the points that we have discussed. I'm not going to go through these now, since we have already covered it yesterday. So I'm just going to give you the key takeaway points, right? So the key takeaway points are, the first one is, Bhagavan can show the universal form by divine vision. So the point here is that if someone claims that he is Bhagavan or he is the Supreme Lord, how do we believe that person? If God himself came here, right, and he said, or somebody claims like that. So just like how Krishna showed the universal form to Arjuna. Arjuna already heard about it, but still he understood in Kali Yuga there will be a lot of imposters, a lot of cheating people who claim that they are God. Currently in India there are about 500 people who claim they are God. I'm not joking. It's around there. They all 500 people. They all claim that they are God in some way or other. So to avoid these kind of problems, so Bhagavad Gita is given, and specifically, if someone says like that, then we ask them to kindly show your universal form. So how do we recognize a universal form? The descriptions are given here in these verses. Okay. And the second takeaway point was Swayam Krishna Rupa is very rare. So here we are making a distinction with the form of Krishna, the two-armed form of Krishna. Just like how we have the statement, we are created in the image of God. So we have two arms. So the image of God. So therefore, God, the original form of God, is having two arms, and this is called Swayam Krishna. And it is very rare, this darshan, or this opportunity to view this particular form is su durdarsham. Durdarsham means very rare, and when we add the su in front, that means it's extremely rare. We talked about that at some length yesterday as well. And the third takeaway point was Swayam Krishna can only be attained. Now, we talked about this Swayam Krishna, and we know he's very rare. So he can only be attained by Ananya Bhakti. Ananya means pure, unadulterated, right? Completely pure Bhakti. So we talked about what was pure Bhakti yesterday in the chapter 11. So that's interesting because this will be the continuation for this chapter, chapter 12. In chapter 11, we ended with the idea that Krishna can only be obtained by Ananya Bhakti. So now in chapter 12, we are going to talk about how that Ananya Bhakti is discussed more in detail. So the entire chapter 12 will be called Bhakti Yoga. We'll come to that shortly. But before we go to the chapter 12 proper, let's look at the Gita Mahatmya. A bit of glorification for the Bhagavad Gita is we need to give the glorification of the Bhagavad Gita for our purification. So this is a verse from the Vaishnava Tantriya Sara, verse 26. Yashranoti cha gitartham kirtayati eva ya param sravayach parartam vai saprayati param padam. The translation goes like this. One who attentively hears and sings the glories of the purport of the Gita or reiterates that purport to others, such a person attains to the supreme destination. So this is, I mean, there are many ways, there are many points in glorification of the Gita. So this is more on glorification of those who take the trouble to read it, or take the trouble to explain it to others, or even take the trouble to understand it. So just by reading it, so much of piety is obtained, and the path to go back to Godhead is already begun. So that is the glory of the Bhagavad Gita. So as I was saying, today, chapter 12 is entitled Devotional Service. So it's a very important chapter, one of the most important chapters. And the Sanskrit title for this is Bhakti Yoga, which directly translates as Devotional Service. Now let's look at what is this devotional service. So it begins with Arjuna asking a question. So if you remember the chronology of what has happened so far, Krishna has told Arjuna about, the importance of doing one's duty without expecting any results. That was in chapter 2. And then he talked about he introduced at the end of chapter 2 a higher goal. So not simply for the sake of enjoyment, not simply we do work for the sake of duty, we do it for the sake of escaping from this material world. So there's a way to do the duty in such a mind frame. So that began the topic of Karma Yoga in chapter 3, the art of work. So we talked about that at some length, chapter 3, and again we continued that with chapter 5. So then he talked about Nyana Yoga. So the culmination of working in an equipoised manner without expecting any results, that will eventually bring about the cultivation of knowledge. So one would develop some wisdom, some understanding and knowledge. So that eventually will bring us to the topic of Jnana Yoga, which is chapter 4. And then how to apply with the Jnana Yoga, with the knowledge that one has acquired and with the detachment one has attained from performing Karma Yoga, one is able to appropriately begin working with the idea of escaping from this material world. We don't want to get punya, we don't want to get papa, sin also. We don't want pious credits, we don't want sinful credits, because both of them bind us within this material world. So all this was discussed, and eventually the idea was Krishna actually gave two paths. So one is called the Nyana Path, I mentioned this many times, and the other is the Bhakti Path. So we will talk about this again in this chapter also. But Arjuna now, after all this yoga is described, and then Krishna starts talking about Bhakti Yoga in more detail from chapter 7, 8, 9, and 10, and 11. And after that, in chapter 11, Krishna shows his universal form. In chapter 10, Krishna shows his vibhutis. It's like that. And after this, now Arjuna wants to know for certain, right? After I've heard now the Nyana Path. I've also heard from you now the so far whatever you have mentioned about the Bhakti Path. So therefore, he wants to clearly understand which is better. So he asks this question. Let's look at the verse together. Arjuna uvacha evam satata yukta ye bhattasthvam prayupasate ye chapi aksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamaha. Translation: Arjuna inquired, which are considered to be more perfect. So both are good paths, because remember, this question was also asked earlier in, I think, chapter 7 or chapter 8, if I'm not mistaken. And Krishna mentioned that both are good, but one is better. So again, Arjuna is asking the same point after hearing in conclusion both the paths that Krishna has delineated over here. So which are considered to be more perfect? Those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worshipped the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested? So which is better, the Bhakti Marga or the Jnana Marga, where they are now moving towards the Brahman? So Arjuna is saying, should I aim for the Brahman realization, or should I aim for the Paramatma, or even higher, the Bhagavan realization, which is attainable by Bhakti? So let's hear clearly again Krishna's unwavering answer or reply. So chapter 12, verse 2, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Mai Aveshya Mano Ye Mam Nitya Yukta Upashate Shradaya Paraya Upetas Te Me Yukta Tama Mataha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, those who fix their minds on my personal form, that means not the Brahman, not the Paramatma, not the Brahman, but my personal form, which is the Swayam Rupa form of Bhagavan, right? The topmost realization of Bhagavan. Those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect. So Krishna is mentioning this clearly. So we may ask, why is Krishna saying these persons are the most perfect? So we have already gone through these points before in previous chapters, but here Krishna is summarizing them because he's not going to talk about this again. So this is the last word. After this chapter 12, there will be Krishna will not be talking about the two paths so much. He will be giving detailed knowledge on other aspects. So that's why here he's summarizing it. So why is the Bhakti path better, right? Obviously, one who worships Krishna and one who remembers him in constant engagement, that is the path of Bhakti, right? So the reason is given in the next verse. Krishna gives in the next verse, in verse 3 to verse 4. He says, for those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, that means he's referring to Brahman, because Brahman is unmanifested. It's an abstract idea, right? So he's saying that means those people who are following the Nyana path, the other path, right? Advancement is very troublesome. Klesho adhika taras. Klesho means troublesome. So very troublesome to make advancement in that path. We heard about that in chapter 6 and chapter 5, mainly in chapter 6, how this pathway is very difficult. Arjuna himself said so, right? to go. I can control the wind, but I cannot do what you are telling me, O Krishna, because to control the mind in that manner is most difficult. But it can be done by practice and detachment, Krishna answered. But nevertheless, it is very troublesome path. So we talked about this several times in several chapters already. So, and he also said it's difficult, do come, very difficult to do this. So we may ask again, why? Why is this troublesome and very difficult? So Krishna again summarizes these points. We talked about it to some extent already. So he's summarizing it now from the next following verses, verse 4 to 5. Why? Because the embodied, worship the unmanifested. First of all, they are trying to worship something which is extremely difficult to imagine, because the Brahman is like the Brahma Jyoti, the light of the Supreme Lord. So spirit, how to imagine spirit and how to worship, there's no focus in that sense. So it's difficult because they're worshipping something called unmanifested. So this is given by Krishna himself. It's his, he's telling this. And then it's also difficult because they are worshipping something which lies beyond the sense perception. They cannot see, touch, hear, feel, or taste that Brahman. Whereas in devotional service, one can. The process of deity worship, the process of chanting, so these things are all very tangible. So it's easier to focus our mind, especially in this Kali Yuga, in our busy lifestyle and all that. And the third point, why it's difficult, is because the impersonal conception is an impersonal conception. So there is no personality attached to this God's. There are three features of God, remember I mentioned. So it's impersonal conception. If those who are taking the jnana, they don't want to accept the personality. They just accept the light, the Jyoti, Brahma Jyoti. So when that happens, that means they are also rejecting the personal assistance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I'll speak more on that in a while. What does that mean? Okay. So let's go through the concept of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan once again, so that we can clearly understand this point. So it's not a concoction that we have created. This is actually from the scriptures. It's based on this verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The translation goes like this: learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. See, it's over here. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti. So it is, the concept is, it's scriptural and it's accepted. So what is this Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan? So imagine someone who is going to, they go to a place, they are looking for something. Imagine there's a tunnel, right? They go to a train station. Let's say the persons have never seen the train station before, or never seen the train or anything like that. They go to the train station. This is like a subway, right? Or even our KL, what do you call that place? KL Central, yeah. So it's all underground. So when we see when the train is coming, we don't know. Imagine we haven't seen before. So the person sees, and he sees light, and he sees the light coming. So if at that point, let's say there are three people who go and see this. The first guy, when he sees this light coming, he's satisfied. Oh, okay, now I know this is the train. So therefore, then he goes off. He doesn't wait until the train comes. He sees the light and then he moves away. But when the train comes nearer, there are two more people waiting in the station now. When the train comes nearer, then the second person and the first person, they see the source of that light is this train. They can see that. So then they can understand, this is the train. Oh, it looks like this. It's a metallic structure. It's like moving on rail tracks, right? So then after that, the one of them goes off. He decides to go away. So now that's only one more person left. So this one more person, he actually boards into the train, and he's able to go to the front of the train, And he sees that there is a driver in that train. There is someone who's controlling the train, right? So then all three of them meet one day, and then they meet one day, and then they talk about their realizations. So if someone, there's a fourth person who says, "Have you all seen the train?" Then the first guy says, "Yes, yes, I've seen the train. The train is light. It's bright light." Whereas the second guy says, "Yes, you are right. The train is bright light, but actually it has a source, and the source is a mechanical structure." And then the third guy, he says, "Yes, the structure is there, but someone is actually controlling this entire thing. Otherwise, it's just a husk. That's it." So all three of them are correct, but one person's realization is higher than the other. Correct? So this is the concept of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So the Jnanis, they attain Brahman realization. But that's all they can go. They cannot go further without without certain extra processes. So the Jnani, they go through the scriptures, they understand knowledge by experiment, and also by understanding carefully the scriptures. They're able to differentiate matter, and they're able to differentiate to spirit, and they get a deep understanding about what is spirit and the goal of spirit and the goal of life, which is attaining Brahman. So all this is done intellectually by study, scriptures, and realizations. So that is the Jnani Yoga, the Jnana Yoga, the Jnana Yogi. And then the person, the Jnani, who now, after understanding this, he takes up the process of meditation. He wants to go further. He wants to understand deeper beyond it. Now, understand that the person who achieves Brahman is already liberated. He's already free from this cycle of birth and death. But his understanding is limited. Whereas the person who does the meditation and goes through the Ashtanga yoga process one by one, and concentrates on the Paramatma. So when he concentrates in the heart, the super soul or the Paramatma reveals himself eventually. And that is the understanding of the Paramatma. So he actually sees there is light everywhere. Light is Brahman, but there is also Paramatma, a localized feature of God in every living entity. So he sees that Paramatma in every living entity, and he sees that in all non-living things also. So that is the Paramatma realization. He sees that there is a form to that light. There is a source to that light. So then finally we have but that's all they can go. They cannot go further. That's it. So the only person who can go further, like how Krishna says in the previous chapter, chapter 11, and he also mentions this in chapter 7 and 8, I think. So he says only the pure devotee, only the devotee can understand the Bhagavan aspect, the personal form of the Lord. And then he says there are different grades of devotee also. So there is the mixed devotee, and there is also the pure devotee, Ananya Bhakta. So here is we're coming to what we have discussed so far. Remember, I gave the example also last time about the sun. Now, this concept of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan can also be understood in the example of the sun. Just like when we look at the sky and when it's cloudy, we cannot see the sun, just like in this picture. But we know there is light everywhere because the sun is obviously out, it is daytime, and there is ambient light everywhere. So it's bright, yes. So that is the first level of realization. We see light everywhere. But a person who waits and who looks further, once the clouds move away, just like how in the Ishopanishad it says, please remove your effulgence so that I can see your shining face. So that verse actually comes in the Ishopanishad. I've showed it in one of the classes in previous chapters before. So then we are able to see the source of that light, which is the sun. But it is only the bhakta, the devotee, who is able to understand that that sun has a controlling deity who has a form, who is nothing but the Surya Narayana. So that is the highest realization of a transcendentalist. Okay. So this is the concept of the Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan that we were discussing. So now Arjuna is asking, is the Brahman realization better? Is the Brahman pathway better, or is the Bhagavan pathway better? So for the Brahman and the Paramatma, the pathway is very difficult, Krishna says. So it's like climbing a mountain. Now this example and this picture I've also showed in the chapter 6 before, and we have discussed this. I'm just quickly going through again. So we can understand, if you want to get to the top of a mountain, and then we can either take this path, right, rock climbing, which is not going to be easy, isn't it? Anyone has done it? I have not done it. I cannot even climb. I can't imagine climbing. So anyway, or we can take this path, right? So we can also reach the same destination at the top if we were to take a gondola, right, or a cable car. So the idea is, one process is by my own determination. Here, the idea is, by my own determination, without anybody's help, I will try to climb and go to the top. That's the person's idea, right? Whereas there is also a different idea where I will just surrender to a higher power and allow that person to use his higher power to bring me up. So that's the path of mercy, or the path of surrender. So that's bhakti path. So it is much easier. This was already described many times already. So another explanation can be given is like the acharyas explain that, if you take the other path, the Nyana path, the path of climbing the mountain, so it's like the baby monkey. Now the baby monkey, there are two different types of animals. One is the monkey and one is the lion. Now the baby monkey has to hold on to the mother monkey very tightly. When the mother monkey jumps from tree to tree, it holds on tightly, and then as the mother monkey jumps, it's able to also follow wherever it is. So a lot of difficult endeavor is in the poor baby monkey who has to do all this work. Okay, so that's one thing. Whereas for the the bhakti path, it's the path of we depend on the lion. So for example, the lion is very fierce creature. You can see the mouth of the lion. Like Krishna is he comes as time. Yesterday we heard how Krishna came as time. Kalo Asmi. And then in that way he's destroying everything as time. All the greatest conquerors eventually get destroyed. So in the Kurukshetra war also, he's showing the future, how Drona, Bhishma, everybody will get destroyed. So the mouth of the lion is like death, and time is like death. Now this same lion can use the mouth to kill its prey, right? So in the same way, time kills all entities eventually. But then again, the same mouth of the lion can also carry the cub. The cub doesn't feel fear when it sees the mouth of the lion. So similarly, devotees don't feel fear at the time of death. So for them, death is the Supreme Lord. When they have spent their entire life in preparation for in the path of bhakti, they just surrender. So they just completely surrender. You can see the cub here. He does no effort compared to the monkey. The monkey had to cling on for dear life, whereas the cub has to do no effort in that sense. He just has to. There is one effort the cub has to do. The cub has to surrender. If the cub is wriggling about and moving about, and then it's going to damage his own neck, isn't it? So he has to surrender to the mother or to the father, right? Then he is completely saved. So that's what Krishna is saying. We heard about that in chapter 7 also. In chapter 8 also we heard about this. How this material energy is very vast and very powerful and very difficult to cross. But by the path of surrender, Mayam etam tarantite, I can easily cross over by the grace of Krishna, by his mercy. So that is the idea. So here's another picture of how Narsingadev came to save Prahlad Maharaj. So all these points we've already covered before. So now let's continue with Bhagavad Gita 12, verses 6 to 7. So Krishna is saying that other path, Arjuna, is difficult, is troublesome because of the impersonal understanding, right? It's not easy to perceive, right? And they are rejecting the personal assistance because they are, holding on by they are trying to elevate themselves by their own endeavor. They have rejected the Supreme Personality of Godhead's personality. They don't accept him as one. So therefore, they want to just do it on their own strength. So it's difficult, like climbing a mountain, right? But Krishna is not contrasting. But what about Bhakti Path? He's contrasting the Bhakti Path. He says, this verse is there, 12, 6 to 7. Yetu sarvani karmani mai sanyasamat paraha ananyena eva yogina mam dhyayanta upashate tesham aham samudhartha mrityu samsara sagara bhavamina chirat partha mai aveshita chetasam. So he's saying, but those who worship me, upashate, those who have given up all their activities unto me, right? Karmani mai sannyasa. And those who are being devoted to me without deviation. So very, very devoted, very chaste to the Supreme Lord, without deviation of concentration. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. Their intelligence is fixed. It's not many branched. And those who are engaged in devotional service, Bhakti Yogena. So in this way, and finally, the last point, and those who are always meditating upon me. So meditating here does not mean sitting in posture and meditating, not necessarily. It means one who's always remembering, like, Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj wasn't sitting in posture. He was always remembering the Supreme Lord because of his devotional practice. So one who are able to do these five things, Krishna is telling what he will do for them. O son of Pritha, for them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death, Mrityu Samsara. So in contrast, we can see the other path is very troublesome, whereas the Nyana Path is very troublesome, whereas the Bhakti Path, the Bhakti Marga, what does Krishna say for the Bhakta? He says, for them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. So it's easily done. So here you can see an artist's depiction of how the Supreme Lord comes and saves the soul immersed in the samsara sagara, the ocean of material miseries. So let's stop for a while and take stock of the points that we have covered. So chapter 12 began from verse 1 to 7. The question was raised by Arjuna, which is better, the Jnana or the Bhakti path, and why? He didn't ask why, but Krishna explained clearly that the Bhakti path is better, and he gave reasons why as well. Summary. He mentioned this several times already in other chapters. So here, a complete summary is mentioned. And that's what we have covered so far. And from verse 8 to 12, now Krishna, he's done with the Nyana Path already. He's not going to talk about that anymore. So now he is now giving his full concentration. He had begun to speak about the Bhakti Path from chapter 7 onwards. Actually, he was speaking about it in every chapter before. The last verse, or at least one verse, he will mention the Bhakti Path. But in chapter 7 onwards, it became more prominent, right? And now he concludes the Bhakti Path in chapter 12 here, from verses 8 to 12. So let's see what he says. So this is a very important verse. It's actually the culmination of bhakti. This is the topmost level of bhakti we can understand. So if we have attained this, then we can understand there's nothing further for us to understand. So let's see the verse. Mai eva mana advatsva mai buddhim niveshaya nivasishyasi mai eva atha urdhvam na samsayaha. Translation: Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the first thing. Just fix your mind upon me and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus, you will live in me always without a doubt. Now, it looks simple, but it's not easily done. So, here, the meaning is 24 hours. That means someone who is able to always remember, because the point of what one remembers at the time of death, one attains that, isn't it? So, this is the culmination of that bhakti. So, the practice of the Bhakti Yoga process is to bring us to this point. Just like how the Jnana Yoga process also does that, but it focuses on the Paramatma, but the path is much more difficult. You have to do the postures and all these things, and it's rather impractical. Whereas the same goal, but now attaining the higher realization of Bhagavan realization, which is basically fixing that personality of Godhead within the mind. So it's the same goal that Krishna is describing here. Now, then Arjuna he didn't say it, but someone may give the excuse. Oh, I cannot do that. What you're asking is so high. Like, let's imagine the rest of us, all of us, right? Arjuna is, after all, representing the rest of the jivas. So there's this verse in the next verse. The right after this, Krishna says, Ata chittam samadhatum na saknoshi mai stiram abhyasa yogina tato mam ichhaptum dhananjaya. My dear Arjuna, Dhananjaya, right? O winner of wealth, Dhananjaya means winner of wealth. If you cannot fix your mind now upon me without deviation, now that was what he mentioned in the earlier verse. That's the highest, the top class, the first class devotee. One who's able to constantly at all times remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if one cannot remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead at all times, right, then Krishna is giving us another method. All this is bhakti. He's giving an alternative. It's not in the same level. It's slightly inferior, but it's still within the path of bhakti. It's like a stage. So Krishna began with the topmost stage. So if you cannot do the topmost stage, at least do the second topmost stage. Now, what is that second topmost stage? So this is the translation. Then follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. Now, one can only think of the Lord 24 hours at all time if one has developed Krishna prema. Prema means love. Bhava and prema. Intense feelings of love. So how to develop this intense feeling? Some people may have it due to their previous lives continuation or whatever, right? And some, they come directly from the spiritual world just to enact the pastimes. So then we can see this kind of extreme love, this uninhibited, selfless love called prema. Prema is not an ordinary word. It cannot be applied to anything material. So it can only be applied to the Supreme Lord, where the love, the relationship between the devotee and the Lord is very, very pure, and it is completely without any mixture of selfishness. It is completely selfless for the pleasure of the other person, right? And it is at a very, very high level. So that is called prema. So we cannot, if we don't have that prema, we cannot do what the previous verse just said, remembering the Lord. If one loves someone, one will always remember that person, isn't it? When, we see the romance movies or whatever, if somebody loves someone, they will always think of that person. Whatever they're doing, they'll think of that person. And, the movie industry has sensationalized this concept. Basically, they've taken it from the scriptures only, because all these ideas are there, like Ramayana, Mahabharata, all these things are there. So anyway, so if we cannot fall in love with the Lord, if we have not developed that prema, then we cannot think of him constantly. So how to do what can we do next? So Krishna says, then you follow this Bhakti Yoga process, the regulative principles. Now there are two levels of Bhakti Yoga. One is Bhakti Yoga in liberation. That means one is already attaining very high intense love. And the second level of Bhakti Yoga is done at we haven't got that love yet. We are trying to follow a process where we can learn to love someone. Now, how do we ever fall in love with anybody? If we look at it, it's not that we were born with that feeling, isn't it? If we love someone or whatever, it's not that we were born, right? It's something like an arranged marriage. When someone gets married, or even if you fall, okay, let's talk about the arranged marriage. Initially, the person may not love that each other. It's like an arranged marriage. They feel shy with each other and everything, and then they get together, right? But as they are evolving, as they get to know each other more and more, friendship develops. There's servitude, there is mutual understanding and things like that. And eventually, after many years, they find that they cannot live without that person. This person is actually the love of their life. They have come to realize this point. Now, this is, of course, if it was a success story, right? And that was the idea in those days, in previous yuga, and also in earlier times of our grandparents' time, and even before that. This was very much the case. And love marriages were unheard of, so it was all arranged. So how do they get to do it? Because the lady is trained in such a way, or the husband is also, trained to give full protection to the wife, to provide for the wife, and the lady is trained to serve. So by doing this kind of duty in a very good relationship, they learn to fall in love. So just like now also, if you want to, some people, they fall in love with movie stars, they fall in love with different characters. So why? Because they've seen the movie, right? Some people have seen a movie, and then they've seen many movies about that movie star or that singer. They've heard many songs about that singer, and then they read about him or her in the magazines or in the TV, and then they get to know more, and then they meditate, and then they hear more, and then eventually they feel like, oh my God, I cannot live without this person. And then when the movie star dies, oh, my life is gone. So some of them actually even commit suicide. So these kind of things are there. So now this is basically the science of falling in love. So if we want to fall in love with something, we first of all hear about that personality. So that's why Shravanam, hearing, we hear about the greatness of God. We hear about the beautiful relationship God has with his devotees. We hear about his opulences. So in that way, and on top of that, we do service. We do practical service. Then we follow the regulations within that servitude, and slowly our love will blossom and will develop in our heart, and eventually it will blossom into prema. So this is the practice of Bhakti Yoga in brief. So Bhagavad Gita, it's basically an ABC. It summarizes. So other scriptures elaborate further about all these points. So this is the principle of Bhakti Yoga. So essentially, what are the principles of Bhakti Yoga? So we have A, B, C, D of what is Bhakti Yoga. So number one, A is association of devotees. We join the club. You want to fall in love with someone, you join the club. Falling in love with this person club, right? So therefore, we have the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, and we try to associate with devotees who are all trying in the same direction. And some of them may have developed further compared to us, and we can benefit from that. So association is very important. A stands for association. B stands for books. So it also means hearing. So in the association of devotees, we read about Krishna, we hear about Krishna, we understand about his qualities, his nama, rupa, guna, lila, his pastimes, his relationship. Especially if you read Ramayana, it's very beautiful, the relationship that he had with each and every devotee, and how beautifully they reciprocated with the Lord. So like that, in Krishna Lila is also full of it. How, the gopis, Sudama, so many of them, many stories are there. And the more we hear about the Supreme Lord in his beautiful relationship, the more our impurities within our heart will go away, and our heart will start to melt. When it starts to melt, slowly we will develop love towards that Supreme Lord. So books, hearing. Books basically represents, B for books, it's basically hearing about the Supreme Lord. And then you have C, A, B, C. C is the practical aspect. So servitude. If you want to fall in love with someone, we learn to serve that person with love, correct? Like the mother serves the child. When the child is born, the mother serves the child hand and foot practically, day and night practically. And that's why the mother's love is unparalleled. In this world, the closest thing that comes to love is actually the mother's love for the child. No other love comes that close, at least materially speaking, right? So because it's pure, it's selfless, there is no, at least it should be, but you can still find selfless mothers where they have, they don't care. They don't want anything in return. It's all just simply because of that relationship. So servitude. So because the mother does so much of service for the child, the consciousness, the mother always remembers the child, even as the child grows. So that's why when the child goes away, sometimes he does his work or whatever, the child has love for the mother, but it cannot compare to the mother's love for the child. So in the same way, servitude is very important. So what is the best way to serve? There are many ways to serve the Supreme Lord. We are all trying to fall in love with the Supreme Lord. So there are many ways to serve, and chief amongst them is the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. If somebody is always chanting, Rajinikanth, 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 then we will see Rajinikanth in our dreams. So like that, we try to chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. The name is much more, it's incomparably more powerful than any other name. So it has the potency to actually melt our heart. So that is chanting, A, B, C, and D is diet. So these are the prescriptions of someone who is following in the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. Right? So there are certain, just like we are in a disease condition. If we are in a disease condition, we go and see the doctor. The doctor will say, okay, I'll give you this medicine. This medicine is the chanting of the holy name. I'll give you this medicine, which is you chant this medicine all the time. All right. And I'm giving you also at the same time a diet prescription. You cannot eat certain things. You have to avoid A, B, C. If you have flu, then you avoid certain things like that. No ice water or whatever, something like that. So it's like that. A person who is serious in yoga, especially in one who is in the path of yoga, he normally takes the mode of goodness. Remember, there's mode of passion, ignorance, and goodness. So in food also, there is mode of passion, ignorance, and goodness. So usually he tries to keep his lifestyle sattvic or in the mode of goodness. So, and the same applies for devotees as well, bhaktas. So therefore there is a diet. And it's not just eating food in the mode of goodness, which is basically vegetarian food. Patram fulam toyam. Remember, Krishna mentions in chapter 9, one who offers me a fruit, a leaf, a water. So basically vegetarian items. But it's not enough that it's just vegetarian. It should be prasadam. It should be food which has been offered to the Lord, and the Lord has accepted that offering, and we are eating the remnants of what is left by the Supreme Lord. So just like in olden days, in our grandfather's time, I know, and one of my, I think my wife's son, somebody it's a grandmother. She actually was so attached. It was an arranged marriage only, but she was so attached. The training they had that time, she would not eat any food before her husband has eaten, and she will only eat from the same plate which the husband has eaten. So that was then. This is ancient culture. So the idea here is that she will develop the type of relationship and the type of love that she has for the husband is developed further by these kind of activities. So the same concept is also applied with the Lord. So we are not asking us to share the plate of any other person. We are asking to eat the remnants of food offered to the Supreme Lord. So that these things are the practical aspects of regulatory principles of Bhakti Yoga. So in this way, if we follow all these things under the guidance of a guru, right? In this way, we develop a desire to attain me. Krishna says, you will begin to develop love. The desire will come, and the desire will fructify, and then it will become full-fledged prema or love. So that's the second level. So this is more applicable to all the rest of us. So, but then again, not everybody can take up this path. Some people, due to their circumstances or whatever, they sometimes may give several excuses, or it may be genuine. It can also be due to their mentality, their makeup. So not everybody may. So that you see, the beauty of the Vedic literatures is they give everybody an option. They don't say there is only one, right? Like sometimes the Christians say, there is only one path, otherwise everybody goes to hell. So it's not like that. There are different types of people in this world with different levels of consciousness, of mentality. So for all these different levels, the Supreme Lord has given different levels of practice, right? So then Krishna says, okay, if you cannot do that, still in the path of bhakti, so if you cannot do that, all right, then Krishna is suggesting the next aspect. So in the interest of time, I'll just skip the verse. I'll go straight to the translation. If you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, okay, I cannot be a member of ISKCON. I cannot get initiated from a guru, or I cannot start practicing all the things that I just mentioned just now. Okay, never mind, don't worry. If you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, then Krishna is saying, just try to work for me. Because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. So by dedicating our seva, this is called seva, bhakti seva. So by we may not be following the principles of Bhakti Yoga, but still we are performing seva. Seva for the benefit of the devotees or for the benefit of the Supreme Lord in his direction. So then what happens? We get purified. Our excuses slowly melt away. Our situations start changing. And then we can now find that, oh, now I can practice Bhakti Yoga. We can move on to the next level. So example, here, this is a picture of George Harrison. George Harrison was one of the Beatles. The Beatles were a very, very famous group. The most famous group in history, actually. And anyway, George Harrison, he could not follow the process of Bhakti Yoga at that time. He met Prabhupada, right? John Lennon also met Prabhupada. So, but he was very attracted to the devotees. He was very attracted to Prabhupada. He was very attracted to the other, to the Prabhupada's disciples. He felt they were all so sincere, and his heart really went out to them. But he himself could not, join the movement directly. He had a different idea and everything. But nevertheless, he really did a lot of seva. He actually he was very instrumental in the Hare Krishna movement expanding in England, in London. And then from there, he in fact went to even record a tract. He recorded an album with the devotees, and that album actually reached top 10 in many countries. And some of those songs are still played in our temples. It's a very, very nice service which George Harrison did. And beyond that, he also helped to develop the temple. He actually gave his money to purchase a beautiful manor house, a mansion in UK. It's called the Bhakti Vedanta Manor, and he gave this to the devotees for them to set up a temple and everything. So in that way, he did many seva, though he could not himself practice directly. But Prabhupada was very grateful to this George Harrison. In fact, when Prabhupada was in his final days, his deathbed, he actually removed a ring from his hand and he said, "This is for George. Please pass it to him." So he was so grateful to George Harrison. And George Harrison, after Prabhupada passed away and everything, he also, towards the end of his life, he got cancer. He came to the Hare Krishna temples in Chowpatty in Mumbai, right? I think it was Mumbai. So anyway, he stayed there, and he actually surrounded by the devotees. He took up spiritual life seriously, and he left his life like that amongst the devotees. So therefore, you can see how one can buy. So what is an example of doing this kind of work? So here, if we cannot ourselves practice, so we can give donations to the temple to build a temple, right? Or we can, give donations for prasadam, or, for the seva of the Lord, buying flowers for the Lord, any kind of seva directly, which is for the Lord. This is at a good level also. By doing this, we can go on to the Bhakti Yoga platform. Then Krishna says, still, not everybody understands about Krishna, and not everybody may come in contact with the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. So not everybody may know about devotees or Krishna. They may have different ideas. That's fine. So what about them? So then he says this verse, if, however, you are unable to work in this consciousness of me, that means it's not for Krishna's direct pleasure. If we cannot work in that way, then Krishna is saying, then at least try to act giving up all results of your work and try to be self-situated. So now Krishna is recommending Karma Yoga. So he's saying, like, if you cannot be devotional, if you don't have a devotional bent of mind, never mind. At least don't do your work, but with the idea that I am not expecting any results, that everything is for God, that kind of consciousness. And at the same time, we can also do lots of activities like charity. And some people, they earn a lot of money because they earn this, even whatever amount they earn, they ensure that 25% of it, or some percentage of it, is given to charity. So with the idea that they want to foster the idea that I am not the proprietor, I am not the doer, I am just doing my duty, and it's my duty to do all this charitable work. So like that. So one who does these things, they also will get eventually purified, but it's slower. It takes slower, but it can be done. It will eventually purify the person until they can go to the next level, which we described just now. So then Krishna after that says, if you cannot take to this practice, if you cannot act, if you cannot work in karma yoga, then he says, aim for cultivation of knowledge. Now, previously, we have said that Karma Yoga is the basis, and then from there comes Jnana Yoga, which is the cultivation of knowledge. But here Krishna is telling opposite. He's telling, don't go for Jnana first, go for Karma first. And then only, if you cannot do Karma, then only you look for cultivation of knowledge. Now, there is a difference. This cultivation of knowledge is because, why he's saying go for Karma first? Because Karma is practical. Just like how Arjuna, he also wanted to renounce. He also wanted to go to the forest. I want to leave everything and I want to go. But Krishna told him what? Don't go away and renounce everything. Work in a balanced mind, expecting no return, but do your duty carefully. Because if you artificially renounce and go for some other thing, you will be doing artificial renunciation. Remember, we talked about Markata Vairagya, Falgu Vairagya, all these concepts, artificial renunciation, right? So that method is for more elevated people. Once you do Karma Yoga, you will get the understanding, then you can renounce. You will develop the detachment which is necessary for you to renounce. Because without getting the detachment, it's not going to be easy. It's a very difficult path. Already is a difficult path. If you don't have the detachment and you abandon your work and you go away with the so-called pursuit of knowledge or meditation, when the real detachment has not really developed in your heart yet, then it's a pretending, it's falgu, it's false. And there is a very dangerous chance of falling down. That path is very difficult. So that's the reason Krishna is telling Arjuna, in chapter 12 also, go for that karma yoga path. Develop the detachment. When you develop the detachment, you will get the knowledge automatically. Then you can take the path of bhakti. Don't go in the Nyana Path. You understand? So therefore, but some people who cannot do the karma path, if like, like Arjuna, if let's say Arjuna were to not listen to Krishna in the beginning, and he said, never mind Krishna, it's okay. I just want to leave everything and I just want to go. So then that is the part Krishna is talking about over here. Okay, if you want to leave, if Arjuna, you don't want to fight in this war, if you feel you want to leave, okay, you go to the forest, but at least don't do nothing in the forest. Go and study scriptures. Go and cultivate knowledge. Try to understand something. That person, Arjuna, would not have developed the detachment yet, but still he's doing some useful work. He's not doing nothing, right? So that is what Krishna is trying to say here. If you cannot take to this practice, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. Now, remember, this is not yet yoga. This is not yoga because he hasn't developed detachment yet. Yoga begins with karma or with bhakti. We cannot jump straight to detachment and jnana or knowledge. So this is just practicing. He's trying. He doesn't want to do, he cannot have the equipoised understanding to do work. So he wants to escape, but while he's escaping, at least cultivate knowledge. That's what Krishna is saying. So then he says, but even better than that knowledge, if one has already developed the detachment, if one has already developed the knowledge, and he has come to the level of karma yoga, then he says, then even better than this knowledge is meditation. Because once you get the knowledge, it has to be practically applied. So when practically applied in meditation, then it's higher. And better than meditation is renunciation. So that's complete renunciation of the material world, of the fruits of action. So therefore he says, renunciation of the fruits of action is higher than we artificially try to develop knowledge or we artificially try to meditate. So this is the point he's mentioning here. And by such renunciation, eventually one can attain peace of mind. So this is the fourth level, the fourth class. It's not the top class. So now I'm going to give a summary of what we've just discussed. Okay, so it's 8:30 already. I'll just take a bit more of your time quickly. So first, Krishna says the highest point, the highest path of attaining Krishna through this path of Bhakti Yoga, imagine it's like a ladder, right? The topmost level. So he says, just fix your mind upon me and engage all your intelligence in me, right? But if we cannot do that, then there is the next level. Let's see whether we can fit ourselves in this level. Follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. So remember, this is like taking a guru, taking initiation, following the regulative principles, chanting Hare Krishna every day, eating prasadam, so things like that. So in this way, develop a desire so that we can come to this level. If we cannot do this level 2, then at least work for me or serve the movement or serve the holy people or the devotees or serve God. So in some way, use the wealth, use our ability, use our capabilities to do some kind of seva, just like how George Harrison did. If we cannot do this for Krishna's pleasure or for the devotees' benefit, then at least try. Let's keep God out of the picture. Let's keep Krishna out of the picture. Fine, some people will think that way, but at least try to act giving up all results. Give up all the results of your work and try to be self-situated. So if some people say, no, I don't want to act in duty. So like how Arjuna initially wanted to go to the forest, he said, I don't want to act. Imagine if he didn't listen to Krishna and he just dropped his bow and he had gone to the forest. Then Krishna is telling for these people, right, at least go to the forest, but don't do nothing. So at least engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. So this is what Krishna is telling. So these are the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels. Okay, it's very similar to the verse which we talked about, right? And this is the summary. So that was the summary just now. So let's look at the context again. So for this chapter, verse 1 to 7, Krishna clearly said Bhakti Path is better. And then from verse 8 to 12, Krishna talks about the Bhakti Yoga, the Bhakti process, and the Yoga ladder. So if you cannot do this, then do this. If you cannot do this, then do that. If you cannot do this, then do that. So like that, he mentioned all these things. So he talked about the Bhakti ladder, Karma Yoga, Jnana, and Nyana Path as the third and the last option. So the best is the Bhakti Path. And then from verses 13 all the way to 20, Krishna now talks about who are the types of people who Krishna considers very dear to him. So if we want to know who are the type of people God considers very dear, so now God or Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna, cultivate these qualities. If you are following in the path of bhakti, then one needs to cultivate these qualities by following this path. So chanting Hare Krishna helps us to develop these qualities. So what are these qualities? So Krishna Priya. Priya means one who is very dear to Krishna. So Krishna mentions in 12:13 onwards. So I'm just summarizing all these points. He says one who is not envious of Krishna, right? So otherwise one cannot be a bhakta. To become a bhakta, one cannot envy the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, to those people who envy, that's why the other path is given, the path of jnana, when one can be independent of Krishna. They cannot be fully independent, but at least they can feel like I am developing myself by my own ability. So like that they may talk, like climbing the mountain with the rope. One has to be friend of all jiva, equal vision. One has to be free from false ego. One has to be equipoised. So these people, we may not all qualities one may have, right? But we should understand at least what are the standards so that we can learn to develop what is right and what is wrong. So these things are what is appreciated by the Supreme Lord. Now, that's our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada. His guru is Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. And he always says this statement. He says, don't try to see God because we don't have the eyes to see God. So he says, instead, act in such a way that God wants to look at us. So these are those ways which God would want to look at us. So equipoised, that means one who is undisturbed in happiness and in distress. One is equilibrium. The mind is equally positioned in happiness, distress, in heat, cold. Like that, he talks about these things in the verses. One who is tolerant. One who is satisfied. That means he's not always thinking something is better, I want something better. One who is self-controlled. One who is determined in the bhakti path. One who follows the bhakti path with determination. He's trying. So that is also someone who's dear to the Lord. One who practices ahimsa. That means he doesn't want to hurt any other living entity. Who focuses on that strongly. One who is pure. That means one who is sincere. Sincere means no crookedness. Not for ulterior motives, right? One who is expert. Expertly, even if one is not expert, one is trying to be expert for the benefit of Krishna or for the benefit of Krishna's seva. So that is that. That means if somebody wants to practice cooking, someone likes to cook for the Lord. So he's practicing to cook for the Lord nicely so that the Lord will enjoy the best. So that kind of expert, for the pleasure of the Lord or for the pleasure of the devotee, or even for anything, for one who practices something well, that is also dear to the Lord. Dependent on Krishna, one who is always dependent on Krishna. He understands that God is the ultimate benefactor. We can try, we can put our effort, right? We have our karma also, but it is God who actually ordains. So there is a saying, not a blade of grass moves without the will of God. So anyway, so another point is indifferent to outcome. They are not outcome oriented. It's like karma yoga, So they don't want the fruits of the action. One who is desireless. Now this is not easy to get. So by practicing devotional service, one can come to this platform. One can slowly lose material desires. right? That is also someone, if some achieves this, then he's very dear to the Supreme Lord. One who renounces both punya and papa, that means both pious activities and sinful activities. He does activities, but not because he wants the piety. He does it because he wants to please the Lord, or at least he does it because out of duty. So this is again karma yoga or bhakti yoga. One who tries to free himself from bad association. This is a very important point. Krishna finds that one who tries to free himself from bad association means those people who are very materialistic, who are taking one away from spiritual understanding or away from the spiritual path. So this requires some sacrifice, right? So one who does this is also dear to the Supreme Lord. One who is generally silent. Silent means not that he doesn't talk anything at all. That means whenever he speaks, he or she speaks, he speaks about godly matters, not about mundane material things. So one minimizes the speech in the material aspect and maximizes speech in the spiritual aspect. Like, for example, talking about Bhagavad Gita or talking about Krishna's pastimes, that is also considered silent, because though he speaks for talking, he's talking about spiritual matters. One who doesn't care for any residence, that means he's not interested in the place where he's living. He understands that wherever he's living is only temporary. So he doesn't therefore invest too much attachment to that. Some people get very attached to their birthplace or to the land of their, to their house. So that kind of attachment is not healthy for spiritual life. So one who tries to be detached of all this, Krishna finds that person dear, priyam. And one who is fixed in knowledge. So one who cultivates knowledge, who tries to understand more and more about spiritual matters, about spiritual philosophy, about Krishna's leelas, pastimes. So that is also someone who is dear to the Supreme Lord. So we're almost going to finish a bit more. So this is the last verse of Bhagavad Gita, verse 12-20. Yetu dharmam, let me just read the verse for you. Yetu dharmamritam idam yatoktam paryupashate shradadhana matparama bhaktaste ativa me priyaha. The translation is, this is the last verse of chapter 12, and it's actually the shortest chapter in Bhagavad Gita. So here he says, those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service. So there is no fall down from this devotional service. That's why it's called imperishable. It's a very safe path and it's protected and there is no loss. That's actually a verse to mention this. Neha Bikrama Nasusti. There is no loss in this path. Those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. So Krishna here now says, not just dear, very dear. Not just very dear, very, very dear. So the word used here is ativa, me. So this is a very special word where it means extremely dear to me. Who are dear to me? Those who follow the bhakti path. So there is a clear difference. Now Krishna says, I am equal to all living beings. He says that I am equal. Sarva aham sama. I forgot that verse, but basically he's saying I'm equal to everyone. It's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. But at the same time, Krishna also says, I am partial to my devotees. It's just like the parent. Now the parent may have several children. So you could say the parent is equal to all the children. Sama. What do I mean by equal? Equal in opportunity. I may give equal opportunity, equal association, equal time given to all the children. But some children may go the extra mile to please the parent back, whereas another child may not. Another child may be disobedient or something like that, whereas the other child is very obedient, and on top of that, he tries to further please the parent. He wants to have a closer relationship with the parent. Now, who do you think the parent will have a dearer attachment? He may be equal. I give equal opportunity, yes, but the parent wants to be always more with the child who's reciprocating in kind, isn't it? The love the love for that parent increases more. So similarly, the same idea or concept is also there for the Supreme Lord. So he says, one who is following the imperishable path of devotional service, and why Krishna finds this very dear, because the child is actually trying. Imagine the child who is getting up and stumbling and trying to walk and going to the one child is going towards the playground, and the other child is turning and coming towards the father. He says, "Father, Father," and then he's coming, but he's stumbling and falling. He's coming and stumbling and falling. So the father becomes very affectionate, and he goes to pick the child up. So just like how we say, we take one step towards God, God takes 10 steps towards us. So therefore he says, those who are bhaktas, who follow the path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. So to the extent that we put our investment in this, to that extent Krishna reciprocates with us. So this is an example. An example of such a person is Srila Prabhupada. I actually wanted to talk about Srila Prabhupada here, but we don't have time. So we will stop here and we will continue with the class in the next day. So thank you very much. We will stop here at this point. Are there any questions? Oh yeah, I forgot to give you the key takeaways. Let me just go. I'll skip all this. I will just go to the key takeaway. All this is a story I wanted to mention. It's okay. So, this is the part where I was showing you how when the child comes towards the father reciprocates in kind, and all personal assistance is given to the bhakta. Whereas the impersonalist, the Nyana Path, doesn't get the direct personal assistance of the Supreme Lord. I'll skip this for now. So the key takeaway here is the bhakti path is the best and the highest, Krishna mentions here, and the levels of bhakti for gradual advancement is shown to us. The details of how we can gradually advance step by step. Okay, and we end with this verse here. Sorry. Jaya, okay, let's just go to the translation. O Harinam, O name sung by the sages, O transcendental syllables that bring bliss to the people. Even if you are spoken only once, and even if you are spoken disrespectfully, you at once remove the many harsh sufferings of everyone. So this is in glorification of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, or the names of Hari. So let's just say these names: Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara, Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I hope that we can all chant this Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day. Any questions from anyone before we end? I'll stop.